But first up, the news with Onelin Zinzi and our sports headlines with Msibudi Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Lulu, and greetings to our listeners. The South African National Defence Force troops expected back in the country will go through a process of demobilization. The first group of over 2,000 soldiers are expected back in the country from deployment in the DRC tomorrow. The troops were sent 2 years ago on UN and SADC peace mission. SADC leaders resolved to withdraw the mission amid growing international pressure after 19 SADC soldiers were killed in clashes between the DRC army and the M23 rebels. The spokesperson, Prince Shabalala, says they are ready to receive them.
So far, they will undergo what we call the process of demobilization. We have in place our medical psycho-support teams that are in place that will ensure that they are evaluated. They go through our own administrative process as per regulations in terms of the National Defence Force, that when we are coming back from any military mission, you go through that process. So we will do that normal standard routine of demobilization process where they will be debriefed and also receive psycho support in terms of the medical and to ensure that they are fully integrated back into the National Defence Force.
The Kenyan government has dismissed claims by human rights activists that it is responding with violence to its citizens. This comes as there is public outrage in the country over the death of blogger Albert Ojwang in police custody. Ojwang was hit on the head and his death was likely to have been caused by assault. A post-mortem has revealed. He was arrested in Homa Bay, a town in western Kenya, on Friday. Responding to a video posted online by activists by human rights Wanjeri Nderu, government spokesperson Isaac Mwaura says he doesn't agree with her sentiments.
I don't think so. I don't agree with that Wanjeri person. I think that is just evoking a lot of emotions and trying to talk as if the country is burning. Of course, possibly posturing for Western donors. That's not the case. I completely dissociate myself with that kind of sentiment from such a person.
The murder case of South African musician Keenan aka Fobbs and his friend Tibelo Tibbs Mutswane is expected to resume today in the High Court in Durban in the KwaZulu-Natal province. The prominent rapper and his celebrity chef friend were gunned down outside a restaurant in Durban 2 years ago. 5 people are accused of the murders. They face charges including murder, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, unlawful possession of firearms and money laundering. The United Nations has warned that refugees are slowly starving in camps after massive cuts in funding from donors, including the U.S. Head of the UN Refugee Agency says the number of refugees and displaced people around the world has nearly doubled over the past 10 years. But it says the amount of money the agency gets has remained unchanged. Filippo Grande, who works in Ethiopia, describes the impact of the cuts.
Here in Ethiopia yesterday, I was told that in field hospitals treating children affected by malnutrition, children get discharged before they're completely empty again to make space for other children that are more malnourished, at high risk for those that are discharged.
And lastly, the Israeli and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has accused Hamas of killing at least 5 people in an attack on a bus transporting Palestinians working for the organization. Meanwhile, the UN General Assembly will today vote on a draft resolution that demands an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in the war in Gaza. The BBC's Hugo Pachega.
This attack happened late last night on a bus carrying 24 Palestinian workers who have been working with the organization. This attack was carried out by Hamas. It followed days of threats from Hamas. Israel hasn't allowed international news organizations to enter Gaza and to report independently from inside Gaza. But obviously, this is this controversial new mechanism backed by Israel and the US that bypasses the United Nations and aid organizations for the distribution of humanitarian aid.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Day 2 of a World Test Championship final between Australia as well as South Africa at Lords, and PSG, the latest team to arrive in the USA for the FIFA Club World Cup. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Africa Update with
Thank you to Msibudi Makura with our sports headlines and Onel Nzinzi with our news update. It is 12:07 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa on Channel Africa Radio from an African perspective. We are on DSTV's audio bouquet channel 802, an OpenView channel 628, and on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as on the SABC Plus app, available on the Apple and Google Play stores. And you can join us in conversation on our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook at Channel Africa, you can also send us your comments and voice notes to +2763. That's 406-9126. Hashtag Africa Update, and let us know which country you're in. And if you have any stories that you'd like us to highlight or to focus on, send us an email. It is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or give us a call on +2711 714 4459. And today on hashtag Africa Update Asks. Recently, the United States issued travel bans to 12 African countries. Some in the Democratic Republic of Congo are calling for those bans to be lifted and only be placed on individuals. Now, do you believe this should be the case, or should the travel bans be placed on everyone? Now, do you believe the travel bans that have been placed on the DRC should be placed on individuals directly, or should it be the country as a whole? Share your thoughts or your views on all our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook at Channel Africa. You can also send us your comments and voice notes to +2763. That's 406-9126. That's hashtag Africa Update, and let us know which country you're in.
Africa Update.
Of the leading story that we are focusing on in Cairo, Egypt, NGOs and organizations from across the world embarked on the mission earlier this week in an attempt to get aid into Gaza after an aid boat was seized by Israel. The Maldleen was intercepted early on Monday. One of the organizations that have been detained is South Africa's People Against Gangsterism and Drugs, PAGAD. And joining us now is Kasim Parker, a legal spokesperson for PAGAD. Kasim, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon. Is it afternoon? Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for having us.
Now, Kasim, when was the last time you had contact with your members who were detained in Cairo, and what have they communicated about their situation?
Okay, so the last direct contact was at about 2 o'clock this morning, and then we had what I'm calling a relayed contact that said at 6 they were. So at 2 o'clock, let me put it this way, at 2 o'clock, the communication was they landed safely. They've been through all the normal passport procedures. They have their luggage, and they're now going out of the airport to go towards the accommodation. Then we didn't have contact with them for until about 6 o'clock this morning. And the communication that we then received was after coming out of the airport, the security came to us and said, you've got to go back in. You're going to be detained and you might be deported. Since then, we haven't heard from them. And this is why we raised the issue. So now at the moment, we've drafted a letter to the South African Embassy in Cairo. There are other people that have made representations to the embassy. We've drafted or copied the letter to DIRCO, stating the rights of travelers and South Africans, and indicated, their freedom of association and so on. And basically just to ensure that whoever is keeping them, whether it's for questioning or detention, actually ensures that they have the right to either be represented if there's anything that's deemed problematic, or to continue on their journey. And we certainly hope that if it is only for questioning for whatever reason, that they will be allowed to continue their journey in support of the people of Gaza.
Now, how many of your members were part of the delegation? And, with regards to the process of what were the reasons given with regards to their detention, if any? You've just touched on the fact that they've just kind of gone blank on everyone. So nobody seems to know what's happening. What are you hoping that DIRCO will do, and the embassy that you've drafted a letter to with regards to assistance with this situation?
Okay, so the first thing, in order to ensure that we have the correct context, PEGAD as a movement and organization received the same notification that I'm sure many people in the world received about the intention of people to go on a world march for peace in Gaza.
Yes.
We responded as an organization and said, the fact that our purpose is to defend the children of South Africa from a scourge of drugs doesn't mean we must turn a blind eye to the plight of the children in Gaza. And that is why we said, while we have limited funds, we will send one person as a PEGAD delegation towards this march. Okay? And that's really what we did. But as soon as that became known to our members, others decided they want to throw in their lot, and we have, by the grace of the Almighty, 7 of our people that have decided they will embark on this journey. Okay? So the 2 officially from the PEGAD as a delegation, but 7 of our members are part of the party. They all form part of the South African contingent for that march towards Gaza. Now, so that's the context of it. They've been on the flight. When they arrived there, the report is that the 7 of them have been moved aside and basically are detained for questioning. We have subsequently contacted, under the circumstances, our first point is their safety and the checking whether they are okay. Whatever the line of questioning is, that's one thing, but we know that not all governments around the world are very civil towards people that they detain. We certainly hope that they are safe.
Now, have you had any contact, or have you made any contact with the Egyptian embassy in Pretoria?
No. So the issue is that we have been in contact with the South African contingent in Cairo, right? So the South African representative in Cairo, and they've said they will start making contact with the Egyptian authorities there. In addition to that, there are others that have gone as part of the same contingent, but not one of the 7, that have not in the same flight, but have actually are in Cairo, and that they are okay. Okay, so we still, and at this stage, we don't know. So we still trying to get the details of where our people are. So the last we've heard, which was probably about 11 o'clock, was that not DIRCO, but the South African embassy is trying to make contact with the or Egyptian authorities to find out about the safety of the people. Now, this is not in response to our letter yet. We've given them a heads up that we will send them the official letter, but telephonically there has been contact made, so they are aware of the questioning or the fact that people have been detained and prevented from leaving the airport.
Now, Kasim, if your members are released at whatever point, does PAGAD plan to continue its involvement in the humanitarian efforts for Gaza?
Well, our first prize would be that we hear from our members to say that they've answered all the questions, if that is the case, and they are allowed to continue. And then they will continue.
All right. Kasim, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you.
That's Kasim Parker, the legal spokesperson for PAGAD, and that is South Africa's People Against Gangsterism and Drugs, joining us on the line. It is 17 after 12 Central African Time. It is 17 after 12 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees' latest Global Trends report reveals a record of 123.2 million people were forcibly displaced by the end of 2024 due to conflict, persecution, and rights violations. Now, Sudan has now overtaken Syria as the world's largest displacement crisis. Despite the number of displaced people doubling over the past decade, the UNHCR funding has dropped back to 2015 levels. And to speak to us about this, we are joined on the line by Eugene Bine, the UNHCR Global Spokesperson. Eugene, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon.
Now, the report shows a record of 123.2 million people now forcibly displaced. What are the main drivers behind this continuing rise, particularly in 2024?
So you can see that there is a still ongoing wars and conflict all of the world, including Sudan, in the region close to you, and Myanmar, Gaza, Haiti, Lebanon, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ukraine. So in 2024, there was absolutely no war and conflict report. So those number continuously increasing last 10 years. Displacement has nearly doubled. 2015, we're looking at the 60 million people forcibly displaced. Now, after 10 years, we're looking at exactly double number, meaning that the war and conflict increase without any solution to it.
Now, Sudan having now surpassed Syria as the largest displacement crisis, are you able to explain the scale and urgency of the Sudan situation and how the UNHCR is responding? Just considering that the amount has now, in terms of funding, has dropped back to 2015 levels.
So Sudan is the largest forced displacement situation in the world in 2024, with the 14 million refugees and internally displaced person, meaning that 10 million Sudanese are internally displaced, while 4 million people from Sudan cross the border in neighboring country. And then what is most significant of the Sudan number is that the crisis continue, as you rightfully say, the funding decrease at the same time, and we're heavily depend on the hostility of host community inside of Sudan as well as neighboring country. And when you see the neighboring country of Sudan, Chad, South Sudan, there is still ongoing challenges in those countries. And top of that, the South Sudan is also having a conflict at the moment, pushing the people toward the Sudan because they literally have no choice but flee to the country who is experiencing the conflict itself. So when you see the dynamic of the region is really need the crisis and need attention from the international community and also support. And as the humanitarian sector is experiencing a severe funding crunch, that a lot of the Sudanese people fled to the neighboring country, also having a difficulty and challenge to receiving the really basic services they deserve.
And I can imagine the challenge that you're faced with as being the UNHCR and the funding crisis. What impact is this having on your ability to deliver aid and protection?
This whole situation we're facing, the forced displacement situation, is not sustainable. The funding crisis has put the humanitarian system at a really breaking point. We're talking about the women and children crossing the border to Chad, malnourished children, increasing number of malnourished children, and then the woman who is giving birth in unhealthy situation without any support. So we're looking at the really breaking point that if those support is not coming, we're gonna see the fatality very soon, and we're really looking to that breaking point of that refugee and displaced person are dying.
Now let's talk about the returns. You mentioned that 1.5 million Syrians have returned in the past 6 months. What are the main factors contributing to this?
So there are signs of hope, of course, in the report, particularly in the area of a solution. For example, 9.8 million forcibly displaced people were able to return home. But we must be really acknowledge it that many of these return were under duress or in adverse condition, meaning that they are returning to the country like Afghanistan or Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar, South Sudan, Syria, Ukraine, where remain that the situation is fragile. So some of them don't have choice, so they have to go back to their country. For example, South Sudanese refugees who are stayed in Sudan, they made a difficult choice to return to their country where there is ongoing conflict. Same for Ukraine, same for Democratic Republic of Congo. They don't have a choice. So of course, we see it as a sign of hope for example, Syria case, but we have to also remember that a lot of them are returning to the country that still fragile, the security situation, which means that return is not sustainable.
Yeah. And just in wrapping up, any regions or situations that are showing some positive trends or successful solutions?
So we're seeing when we see the solution, we're talking about return to their country, which I highlighted that Syria is the example that a lot of Syrians in neighboring country decide to return to their country and rebuild their life there. But that doesn't mean that their return will be sustainable. We still need help support the Syrians to rebuild their life, for example. And also we are seeing that a lot of country open their door for resettlement for the most vulnerable refugee and then displaced population. So we're really increasing the international community to open door for those people who really need safety and then the support, and as well as supporting the host community to continue to support those in their country.
Yeah. Well, Eugene, we'll have to leave it here for today. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you.
That's Eugene O'Brien, the UNHCR Global Spokesperson, joining us on the line.
Get Channel
Genetic study has found that genes not associated with breast cancer in women of African ancestry contribute to 30% of breast cancer cases in South Africa. This was research done by the Sydney Brenner Institute for Molecular Bioscience at the University of the Witwatersrand. And to tell us more, we are joined on the line by Dr. Magda Bahayet, a lead author of the study. Dr. Hayat, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Now, tell us more about this study and what was really discovered, just in the layman terms.
Sure. So to start off, I guess it would be imperative to distinguish between the two kinds of genetic breast cancer that we see. So the one type is inherited breast cancer, which makes up makes up a minority of, genetic cancers as a whole. So it's about 5 to 10% of breast cancer cases are due to inherited breast cancer, and that's when, you have it in your family. So your mum or aunt or uncle even or grandfather might have had breast cancer, and that's the very inherited type of breast cancer. The remaining kind of breast cancers that we see attributed to genetics is more due to common genetic variation, that any person might have a certain combination of genetic variation, and that particular combination of genetic variation would put them at higher risk of developing breast cancer, and that's what we looked at. So we tried to identify this common genetic variation that anybody could have, regardless of family history or not, that could increase their risk of developing breast cancer.
And what advancement is the study likely to have on breast cancer risk associated with women of African ancestry?
So we know that in genetics, African genomics, or the African genome, is quite different to non-African genomes, particularly because they're a lot older and they have a lot of genetic variation that we don't see in non-African genomes. So historically, a lot of these genetic studies, the genome-wide association studies, or GWASs, have been carried out in non-African populations. So this study was the first one to be carried out in an African population on breast cancer, and so we are at the beginning of this genetic journey for breast cancer. However, going forward, we we're partnering with a global study called Confluence, which will increase the number of resident African populations in genetic studies for breast cancer. And going forward, in the near future, hopefully, these kind of studies will help with screening individuals and identifying people who are at higher risk of developing breast cancer, and that would then inform screening strategies going forward. So, increasing breast examinations, increasing mammograms, etc., to try and catch the cancer early.
Now, breast cancer is the most common cancer in women globally. How much investment is there in research in this field, and is it enough?
In sub-Saharan Africa for breast cancer, I think we definitely need more funding, particularly in the genomics sector. We need more funding, we need more scientists so that we can train scientists, and we also need the infrastructure in order to be able to do this. So, we need more, and collaboration really helps internationally and nationally to be able to help move this genomics journey forward.
Now, let's talk about the meaning of this, and in terms of treating breast cancer in African women, making a difference. How much of a difference will it make?
In terms of treating, we know that a lot of women in South Africa and sub-Saharan Africa as well, they do end up presenting to the clinic a lot later once the breast cancer's reached, the third and fourth stage, and the cancers are typically quite aggressive. And so it becomes very difficult to treat once it's reached that stage. So by using genomics, we would try and prevent, patients getting to the clinic or the hospital at that later stage. We want to catch it early. But by also identifying risk factors, or by identifying genes that are involved in the cancer, within the cancer, we could perhaps use those as target in therapy as well.
Yeah.
So that also a long way down the line, but it is very possible to then have gene targeted therapy for treating cancer.
Well, Dr. Hyatt, thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. We'll leave it there for today.
Thank you for having me.
That's Dr. Mahtab Hyatt, a lead author not associated with breast cancer, now contribute to about 30% of breast cancer cases in South Africa. It is 12:30 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. News headlines up next with Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. A delegation forming part of the global march to Gaza has been detained in Cairo, Egypt. Different organizations from across the world had embarked on a mission earlier this week in an attempt to get aid into Gaza. The death toll in the wake of the storms that hit the Eastern Cape province in South Africa this week has risen to 57. Search and rescue operations are ongoing for more people, including 4 learners who were traveling in a minibus taxi that was swept away. And an Air Indian plane has crashed into a residential area near an airport in India's western city shortly after takeoff. The head of the civil aviation says there were more than 240 people on board. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Onele. We say good afternoon to Msibudi Makura with our sports update.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. A very good afternoon from the Sports Day. So today marks a year to the start of the FIFA World Cup. So on the 12th of June 2026, the world will come together in North America for the kickoff of the FIFA World Cup 2026, now taking place across 3 countries, as well as 16 vibrant host cities with a newly expanded pool of 48 teams. The tournament will be the largest and most inclusive FIFA World Cup in history. The 2026 edition is expected to welcome 6.5 million fans to stadium across Canada, Mexico, as well as the USA, truly uniting the continent and globe through football. The milestone also comes as the USA prepares to host a new FIFA Club World Cup tournament, which kicks off this coming Saturday in Miami, Florida. The tournament will feature 32 of the best teams in club football from around the globe vying to be crowned FIFA's true Club World Cup champion. While the Black Stars head coach Otto Addo has already outlined his plans for the next international assignment, despite it being about 87 days away. So the Black Stars are, after their involvement in the Unity Cup 2025, returned to competitive action in September for the continuation of the 2026 World Cup qualifiers. Ghana will face off with Chad as well as Mali, 2 of the teams that they've already beaten in the qualifiers. During the September window that's coming up, they'll be facing off with those teams and looking, of course, an inch closer to another global showpiece qualification. Ador says plans are already underway, and the first will be to get the maximum points when they travel to play Chad. In the recent outing, the Black Stars lost to Nigeria while beating Trinidad and Tobago in the Unity Stadium, which was played in London just last month. In cricket news now, the Proteas women's side lost to the West Indies women's team by 4 wickets in a rain-effective first ODI that was played at the 3Ws Oval in Cave Hill, Barbados on Wednesday. South African women's side posted a final score of 252 for 9 in 50 overs. Tamsin Brits as well as Nadine de Klerk hit 57 as well as 42 respectively. Ayanda Hlubi meanwhile took about 3 wickets. A half century from Kwana Joseph and a solid support acts from the experienced duo of Hayley Matthews as well as Stephanie Taylor helped the West Indies to a 4-wicket victory on the day. They now lead the series 1-0. Britt says they have to improve in the next matches.
Yes, I think we actually started quite well with the bat up front. I think Wolf and I, in the power play, we actually got to, 43 or 45. I don't think that was too bad. I do think we maybe lost it a bit in the middle. Bowling, I think we didn't hit our line and length probably like we should. I think they came out guns blazing, so all credit to them for doing that. But we're going to have to pull up our socks. We can't keep losing the first ODI. We're going to have to start winning that and making that a change, especially if we're going to the World Cup.
Right. Meanwhile, in live cricket action, the Proteas facing off, of course, with Australia. This is day 2 of the World Test Championship. The day having resumed just an hour and a half ago, where South Africa is currently now on 87 for the loss of 4 wickets. This after 35 overs, still trailing Australia by 125 runs. It was Australia yesterday who were bowled out for 212 runs in 56.4 overs. In tennis news now, American Taylor Fritz stepped up his Wimbledon preparations as he swept aside Frenchman Quentin Hales with a 6-3, 7-6 victory to advance into the Stuttgart Open quarterfinals on Wednesday. The world number 7 banged down 12 aces and struck 32 winners in an hour and a half contest. The 27-year-old, twice quarterfinalist at Wimbledon, will next face Hungarian Martin Fucsovics at the ATP 250 event. Fucsovics beating France's Arthur Rinderknech 7-6 and 6-2 to book his place in the quarterfinals of the competition. And finally, Tyrese Haliburton praised a team effort from the Indiana Pacers after they beat the Oklahoma City Thunder 116-107 to take a 2-1 lead in the NBA Finals. Haliburton scored 22 points and also made 11 assists and 9 rebounds as the Pacers overturned a 5-point deficit going into the fourth quarter in Game 3 of the best of 7 series. The Pacers bench outscored the Thunder by 49-18, with reserve Benedict Mauritane contributing 27 points at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. Now, the Pacers, who went into the game after 123-107 defeat in Game 2, extended their run of not losing consecutive games since March of this year, while Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the NBA's most valuable player, scoring 24 points for the Thunder, but only 3 in the fourth quarter. Jalen Williams top scored for the visitors with 26 points, while Cheat Hulgram scored 20 points and made 10 rebounds for a Thunder side that gave up 19 turnovers, which led to about 21 points for the Pacers. It's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné?
We say good afternoon to Chandu Kolikeke with our business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon. The South African Federation of Trade Unions has expressed concern over the World Bank's recently approved loan to South Africa. The Labour Federation has argued that the $1.5 billion loan will worsen the country's dependence on foreign creditors. The loan is intended to support structural reforms which are aimed at improving the country's infrastructure. The Labour Federation also says South Africa has already seen the devastating impact of conditionally linked loans, which it has attributed to the creation of ArcelorMittal. SAFTU General Secretary Zulenzima Vavi
We think that this is basically a return to the structural adjustment programs that are being pushed by the Bretton Woods institutions such as the bank itself as well as the World Bank, which is a push for commercialization and privatization.
South Africa's Deputy Minister of Social Development, Hanif Hendricks, says boys must be guided and supported so that they become future leaders. Hendricks was speaking at the Prime Stars-led initiative, State of the Boy Child 3-Year Impact Report, launched at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in South Africa. The initiative has sparked a national movement reaching over 60,000 boys in township and rural schools through edutainment, film, Good Men Guide, workbooks, and the free Prime Stars digital platform. Hendricks comments.
So, like I said, they must be mentored, guided, and supported so they become the future leaders in our homes, in our families, in our communities, and in our nation. I would want to see that each of them demonstrate tangibly Ubuntu characteristics.
Tanzania's economic growth is forecast to rise to 6% this year from 5.5% last year. Finance Minister Kitila Mkumbo says that the budget deficit was seen at 3.0% of gross domestic product next fiscal year from 3.4% of GDP this year. The East African country is set to hold an election in October. President Samia Suluhu Hassan is seeking to remain in power, having taken office in 2021 after the death of her predecessor, John Magufuli. Ivanhoe Mine says it has resumed underground mining in part of its Kakula copper mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo that had been closed due to seismic activity but lowered output guidance for the year. Mining on the mine's western side resumed on the 17th of June, while Ivanhoe will start pumping water out of the eastern side in August, aiming to finish by the year's fourth quarter. Tracy Boomgard reports.
It will also look to open a new section for mining in the eastern part. The Kakula mine is part of the giant Kamoa-Kakula copper mining complex. The Canadian miner says it now expects 370,000 tons and 420 of copper output from the Kamoa-Kakula mining complex. It had withdrawn earlier guidance of 520,000 and 580,000 tons following seismic activity and floods in May. For Channel Africa News, I'm Tracy Bumgard.
Barrick Mining has removed its Mali gold complex from its overall output forecast for 2025. Operations at the Lulu Gaboo gold complex, one of the Canadian miners' largest gold assets in Africa, have been suspended since January after the military-led government blocked gold exports by the world's third largest miner of the precious metal. Mali risks repelling potential investors while Barrick shares have lagged those of its peers. And your financial indicators this afternoon: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 543, Botswana 13 pula 23, Kenya the dollar is at 128 shilling 474, Zambia 24 kwacha 88. BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 55, Russia 78 rubles 96, India 85 rupee 48, China 71.19, South Africa 17 rand 71 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $3,348, platinum at $1,254 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil at $69.10 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet.
12:45 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. The Africa Food Show is coming to an end in Cape Town, that's in the Western Cape province of South Africa, following a two-day conference which showcased over 300 exhibitors from more than 30 countries globally. Chefs and bakers showcased their skills, creativity and the best of local talent on the expo floor. And to speak to us about the exhibition, we are joined on the line by Krishna Mutyan, Director of Spice and Flavors from Mauritius. And we will be chatting to Krishna. Krishna, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon, Tracy.
You have over 600 products. Now, can you tell us what they are and which ones are your most popular? But quite briefly, please.
Yeah. So, yes. So we have 688 items. So we deal mostly in basic powdered spices and whole spices. And our best sellers are our Mauritian mixtures in powdered form and paste form.
Now, you're looking to venture into Africa. Tell us why and how will you be doing this?
South Africa being the principal gateway onto the mainland does offer opportunities for entrepreneurs from neighboring countries to tap into. So over the past 3 days, we have received the visits of hundreds of potential buyers, and we look forward to turn these preliminary interests into firm orders and ultimately turn them into long-term partnerships.
And what did you think of the Africa Food Show? And was it worth coming to South Africa for this?
Yes, it was very nice. I have to thank South Africa for this wonderful hospitality. Being at the Africa Food Show is indeed a fabulous experience. It has provided the entrepreneur like myself the opportunity to interact with counterparts. These exchanges have been enlightening. We have discussed issues relating to sourcing and challenges of the new era, So collaboration between entrepreneurs is no longer a question of choice. We have to team up as to meet the growing demand of the market.
And, there's always the sayings, or people will always say that food in South Africa always tastes great, whether it's from different cultures and just the flavors. What did you taste that you'll take home with you with regards to the meals that you definitely must have had?
Yeah, so I had my first Donny Chow yesterday. It was fantastic. It was really, really good. But since we are here, I tasted so many things. That's my favorite one.
Okay, great, Krishna. Thank you so much for joining us and for chatting to us. That is Krishna Mutyan, the Director of Spice and Flavors from Mauritius. And we have now on the line Rajan Valayadan, a business strategist specializing in intelligence gathering. Rajan, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon, Lulu.
Now, Rajan, tell us more about this intelligence gathering and how you put it to use.
Well, in fact, now shows are no longer petty gatherings, small gatherings among Africans. It is large-scale, multi-sectorial interactions, commanding global interest and respect. We are no longer, the small players and who can be ignored. And collecting this information, this is what brings connectivity among African countries. And now with the rising challenges, especially posed by Trump's Cold War, I think there is a silver lining to it. There's excellent opportunity. And these opportunities can only be tapped once we understand, once we gather the intelligence of the different markets and what these markets have to offer and connect it with the entrepreneurs within the region, right? And we have a growing middle class throughout Africa, and the imports into Africa have been over 110 billion last year, and it's growing. And gathering all these informations with regards to the standards, we have very, very high standards now in Africa. And these are informations we need to get out to people. We need to raise, the awareness of how potent this market is. And my job is exactly where I come in to collect this information, turn the information into intelligence, and take it to entrepreneurs so that we can connect them.
And just mention a few very briefly, some of the places that you're able to connect in terms of the intelligence that you collect and present. Which countries generally jump at the information that you bring forward?
Well, there are emerging countries where you have entrepreneurs willing to diversify. They have reached a certain maturity within the local markets, and then they want to diversify their products and also diversify the markets. And any countries like Mauritius, for example, it's a small island, and it makes a lot of sense for them to come over and to work along with African entrepreneurs. We have markets and mature markets like South Africa, like Kenya, Botswana, neighboring countries, where we are culturally, there is an understanding, and why go elsewhere where we can do business among ourselves? And the challenge, I think the growing challenge of the new world order today is what's compelling us to strengthen our relationships. And relationships will also mean to strengthen the trade between these countries. We have so much of untapped potential through the SADC, the COMESA, and other, treaties that we have between these countries.
Yeah.
And they need to tap into. And entrepreneurs, very often, they are so busy with their production, and other daily issues
Yes,
that they
Rajan.
often discount these facilities.
Well, Rajan, we have run out of time and we are going to have to leave it here for today. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update.
It's been a pleasure, Lulu.
That was Rajan Valayadin, a business strategist specializing in intelligence gathering, joining us on the line.
Get the news.
60,000 boys across townships and rural schools in South Africa have received mentorship through What About the Boy program. This is contained in the State of a Boy Child 3-year impact report that has been launched at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in South Africa. The initiative seeks to influence the boy child through edutainment programs, emotional intelligence, education and digital platforms as the Southern African nation grapples with the scourge of gender-based violence. Our Channel Africa's news reporter Tutu Ngobeni spoke to Martin Sweet, the Executive Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Prime Stars, about the report.
For many years, we've been involved in youth development. 25 years ago, I launched a program called Take Your Girl Child to Work Day. When I was talking to corporates about helping young girls to break through the glass ceiling, telling them that they could be the minister, that they could be anything they wanted to be in any profession they wanted. It was amazing the kind of approach and the impact that that program had for girls. 25 years later, boys are falling behind at school. They're likely to drop out. They're achieving lower grades, struggling with mental health, more prone to suicide. We are leaving boys behind. And the issue there is that we have to take care of them and make them allies in the fight against gender-based violence. Because if we imagine a cave, Imagine a cave that's called toxic males. Once a man is inside that cave, to young boys and young men, we can prevent gender-based violence in the long run. So that is my objective.
Now, tell us about this, what about the boys? I mean, how many young men has this program touched ever since inception?
Right, so we have a situation where we've created a phenomenal movie, edutainment in its best form, which means education and entertainment. Over 60,000 boys in townships, rural schools have seen the movie, got the book, had mentorship sessions, and practical research through independent means have shown that we're making the impact on young boys. We talk to young girls, we talk to their parents, they watch the movie, they get the book, they get their education, and the impact is beginning to shine through. And as I said in my speech today, I gave practical examples of where the mindset of boys are changing.
Now, tell us about some of the findings from this report now. You are speaking about that the statistics are there's change, you are seeing this practical change in the young men that you have been engaging with. Just take us through some of these findings.
I'd like to give you the report, but I'll go through 3 pointers. 16% of boys are agreed that there are times when a woman deserves to be beaten.
That's Martin Sweet, the Executive Chairman and CEO of Prime Stars, ending that report by Tuto Ngobeni. And it is that time of the day where we say good afternoon and a happy Thursday to Dabukhule Kuleni, a part of the Upside team. What's coming up today? Hello.
Happy Thursday to you too, Lulu. So what's coming up on the show this afternoon? We start off with a very important conversation. There will be a high-level summit taking place tomorrow, a round table, if you will, which will tackle child online safety in Africa. Children are now getting exposed to all kinds of content, and with AI and deep fakes, how can parents be on the lookout to protect their children online? So we'll find out what the parents and policymakers need to know about the summit, which will be taking place tomorrow. And then South African wine goes global with a rare auction of wine, fine wine. It's art meets wine, as both as time goes by, they both appreciate over time. We're talking art and wine. There'll be an auction of note. I don't know if you are a wine connoisseur, Lulu.
No.
So you wouldn't buy an expensive wine just to keep at your house as a memento?
Probably would.
As an art piece, yes.
Yeah, just as a just to have.
Not to drink.
Yeah, not to drink.
And then finally, we get into conversation with the crochet queen of couture, Tsegofatso Chanda, whose handmade designs are making waves from Mafikeng to Milan.
I've seen her stuff. Her stuff is beautiful.
She's amazing.
It just makes you think of back in the day, when our grandparents used to sit there and would be teaching you how to do it, and you think,
and that's coming back in
it's
style,
coming back.
isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
So actually, our grandparents knew a thing or two about
style.
style.
The doilies and,
yes,
and for the table, the duffel ducks and all of that.
They were on the couch. They were on the
table, the side tables, everywhere.
They're making a comeback.
All right, that's coming up at the top of the hour on the Upside with Dabukhule Kuleni and Nompumelelo Ngubeni. For myself, Lulu Gaboo, and the Africa Update team. That's our producer Tracy Bumgard, our technical operator Nanda Koza, and social media Ntsako Mashaba. It's been a great day. Let's do this again tomorrow and continue with us on our social media platforms. Bye bye.
Tune in and turn up the volume. Channel 8. Channel 628. Call us 26 and contribute to the conversation. The African Perspective.
Looking at your top stories this hour, a delegation forming part of the global march to Gaza has been detained in Cairo, Egypt. Different organizations from across the world embarked on a mission earlier this week in an attempt to get aid into Gaza after an aid boat was seized by Israel. One of the organizations that have been detained is South Africa's People Against Gangsterism and Drugs, PAGAD. Legal spokesperson for PAGAD, Kasim Parker, explains.
We've drafted a letter to the South African Embassy in Cairo. There are other people that have made representations to the embassy. We've copied the letter to DIRCO stating the rights of travelers, just to ensure that whoever is keeping them, whether it's for questioning or detention, actually ensures that they have the right to either be represented if there's anything that's deemed problematic, or to continue on their journey. And we certainly hope that if it is only for questioning for whatever reason, that they will be allowed to continue their journey in support of the people of Gaza.
The death toll in the wake of the storm that hit the Eastern Cape province in South Africa this week has risen to 57. This was announced by the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister Velenkosini Hlabisa, who is currently assessing the damage in the Umtata area. Search and rescue operations are ongoing for missing people, including 4 learners who were traveling in a minibus taxi that was swept away by flood waters. Hlabisa has conveyed his condolences and says he will visit the families of the deceased.
We decided to come physically so that we do not become a government that is absent. This is a real disaster and a catastrophe when you have so many people dying over a single day natural cause. We have seen the bridge where the Kumbi or the scholar transport was washed away, and we are here with various stakeholders.
Chad officials say they are worried about the surging number of refugees fleeing carnage in neighboring Sudan to the Central African state, especially with the arrival this week of several hundreds of exhausted and traumatized women and children. Chad has been hosting 1.4 million refugees, including 800,000 arrivals from Sudan since the conflict erupted about 2 years ago. Channel Africa's Moki Kinzeka reports on the ordeal of fresh refugees in Chad's Wadi Fira province.
Chad's government's declaration comes after the United Nations reported this week that it is gravely concerned by the rapidly increasing number of Sudanese refugees crossing into eastern Chad, with more than 20,000 people, mostly exhausted and traumatized women and children, arriving within the past 1 month. The UN says the sharpest rise was recorded in Wadi Fira province, where almost 6,000 people arrived in just 2 days last month. Since April, over 16,000 people have been counted in Wadi Fira, and also about 6,000 refugees in Eninti East.
An official says hundreds of thousands of people are slowly starving in Kenyan refugee camps after youth funding cuts reduce food rotations to the lowest ever levels. The impact is starkly visible at a hospital in the Kakuma camp in the northwest of the country. The camp is home to roughly 300,000 refugees who have fled strife in countries across Africa and the Middle East. The U.S. had provided around 70% of the funding for the World Food Programme's operations in Kenya. But as a result of the cuts, the agency has had to slash the refugees' rotation to 30% of the minimum recommended amount a person should eat to stay healthy. An Air India plane has crashed into a residential area near an airport in India's western city of Ahmedabad shortly after takeoff. The head of the civil aviation says there were more than 240 people on board. The plane, a Boeing 787, was on its way to Britain. The BBC's Arunode Mukherjee.
We've seen some videos that have come up on social media which show black smoke emanating from the crash site. There are some houses that are visible in the area, but I would hesitate to sort of pinpoint what kind of location this was. We've also tried to piece together some information from the flight radar website. So the last signal that was received was moments, seconds after takeoff. The situation on the ground remains obviously extremely chaotic at the moment. Rescue teams have been mobilized. This is information coming in from India's aviation minister. They're on the highest alert as rescue teams have been mobilized.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, from the penthouse of possibility to the skyline of success, this is more than just radio. This is The Upside, where style meets substance, where Africa's finest stories unfold.